might say this. About almost 30 years ago, when I made my first fountain sculpture at the Seattle Public Library, many art writers, art critics came from different parts of the world and looked at it, made comments. One Japanese art critic came and saw it and says, "Oh, this is American." And the American art critic from New York came and said, "Oh, this is very Japanese." Okay, I think that sums it up, really. A lot of people still ask me, "Are you American or Japanese?" Well, I'm neither. I'm both.
George Tsutakawa, his fountains and his creative journey stand as symbols of the fundamental American experience of individuals, groups, and cultures constantly interacting. A dynamic force that often finds expression in new forms and ideas. In many ways, George Tsutakawa's life and art demonstrate the achievement of an unusual balance between the legacy of the past, in this case Japanese, and the innovation and experimentation of America's still youthful and emerging culture.
Well, I grew up in Fukayama, you know, and my grandmother of the Naito family, she was a very cultured lady, and she used to take me to Zen temple every week. She used to take me to no drama and kabuki regularly, tea ceremony, flower arrangement, and all that. And this was very common among many second generation Japanese who were born here, raised in Japan, and came back to Seattle. They wanted to forget everything Japanese as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, and become Americanized. So I went to school, went to college, and took art history and painting technique, and I learned as much as I could about Western culture, all I could. And at that time, I was really trying to forget everything about Japan. In those days, Kenneth Callahan and Morris Graves and Toby too, they have all been to the Orient. They were either working on the freighter as deckhand, and they all spent some time in the Orient, and they were all very much interested in the Zen philosophy and Hindu philosophy and Chinese and Japanese painting and sculpture and history, very much so. I was always learning from Graves and Mark Toby. They had read and learned, and they were more intensely interested in it than I was, because I was just trying to become Americanized. 1941, Japan invaded, dropped bombs on Hawaii, and then the big war started. And that immediately after the war started, I was inducted in the U.S. Army. So I served in the U.S. Army for 4.5 years until the end of the war. My family had lost everything. The store, the warehouses, we had 2 stores, and I don't know, 5 or 6 automobiles, and a warehouse full of merchandise. We lost everything. The alien property custodian took over, and we never got it back. My sister family, who were from Tacoma, were interned in one of those relocation camps in Tula Lake, California. And my sister, and so I went to visit my sister when I was in the U.S. Army. And then in Tula Lake, I met Miami. This was during the war. We didn't get married until after the war ended. I knew she was involved in a lot of Japanese culture, like a tea ceremony and flower arrangement. She also danced classical Japanese dance and then play the Japanese instruments, and which I was very much interested in myself. My wife's brother was killed here. He was a young Army officer, and he was just transferred to Hiroshima about a week before the atomic bomb. So my wife lost her brother here, right here. After the war, when all these GIs came home, and the universities, most of the institutions were just getting all filled up with graduate students or students. And we didn't have any, there was a shortage of instructors. So Mr. Isaacs, the director, one day called me and said, George, I want you to teach some classes. Well, I had never taught art classes before, and I was still just a graduate student, so I didn't know what to say. However, my 2 years of teaching Japanese language in the Army Language School really helped because I had some idea as to approach and methods and psychology in teaching. So I accepted this part-time job. But it turned out that I stayed on for 35 years and eventually became a full-time professor. Archipenko Alexander came as a visiting professor for one semester, where I had very close contact with him, and I think he was probably the greatest influence in my sculpture career. And I have many pieces which I did while he was in residence here. I've been called a professor, teacher, artist, painter, sculptor, model maker, woodcarver, and so forth, even photographer. So when this thought comes up, I'm not really worried about it. In fact, I like to be all of these things. I don't like to make a distinction between painting and sculpture, or literature and music, and so forth. I think to me it's constant influence on my thinking. I became very much involved in this thinking, and I started to make these obuses in wood first, and then it goes into my fountain design. And it's a very basic and very simple way of balancing forms one over another. And fountain is just an addition of water to this sculpture. The board of the new Seattle Public Library discussed this with the architects, and they decided to have some art. So I was chosen as one of the 5 recipients of a public art project for the new library. And then they gave me the toughest one, to design a fountain. And I had never done a fountain before. Now, at that time, I wasn't doing metal sculpture, so I wasn't quite so sure how I was going to do it. So I made some inquiries, and I knew they did a lot of bronze casting in Japan. So I sent to many bronze foundries in Japan with the drawings and asked them to consider and give me an estimate on the job. And you know, I waited for 6 months, and nobody even bothered to answer my letters. So I decided to do it myself here in Seattle. And then at that time, my good friend Jack Uchida came by, and then with Jack and I, we sat down and figured out how to do it. Before I knew it, before the end of the year, I had 2 or 3 more commissions coming to me, and ever since, for the last 27 years, I've been doing 2 to 3 fountains. I did over 60 fountains in the last 27 years. city of Sendai started a project by which they decided to commission major sculptors' work in Japan and abroad for 12 years. I was chosen as the number 4 recipient of the commission. And right now they're on the 9th or 10th. It keep going. And I was delighted to accept this project, and I did quite an ambitious one, which is stands about 16 feet high, but it's in a 60-foot pool with a mound under, and we're using, I don't know, about 1,500 gallons of water per minute on that fountain. And that's all bronze. It was built right here in my studio and crated and shipped over by air and installed. This was in 1980, 81. That was very successful. And since then, I did 2 more, 2 in Tokyo.
I think the thing that I think of more often about George than I do anything else is the total integration of him and his art with his life and with the entire culture. And not only our culture, but other cultures as well.
After about 30 years of work as a professional artist, Western style, about 1960, I suddenly realized that I was missing something. I was doing something wrong. And the American or European way of painting and their attitude and philosophy didn't quite fit with mine. So I started to go back and recall my original training in Japan. And then Buddhism and Zen philosophy and tea ceremony and all those things gradually came back to me. And that's when I started to do fountain sculptures and do other type of sculpture, bronze and wood. And so now I feel I could almost say I'm a little more strongly Japanese than American. Munakata, you know, he was one of the first Japanese printmaker to become international after the World War ended, about 1950. And he is one of the leaders. And he was very much interested not only in Japanese culture, but he was interested in Hinduism, European art, and other subject matter, and mysticism and all that. And so at that time, he was discovered, you might say, by American collectors. The Japanese are still very fond of European art, European sculpture, like Marino Marini and all the other Italian sculptors, and Henry Moore too, very popular in Japan. And there are very few American sculptors work in Japan, especially American sculptors of Japanese ancestry. Noguchi is probably the only other one.
Yeah, well, yeah, to that, but you know what these are? These are old...
tremendous weight.
Yeah, these are old stones, you see.
Yes.
They've been used. So that, you know, it's got a quality of age.
Worn out.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I have known him for, gee, I don't know, 20 years or more. And he, too, usually calls me on the way to Japan or on the way to New York on the way back. And he has come here, and we have had parties together. At one time, my wife and I were in Kyoto, where Noguchi happened to be doing a commission for the Osaka World's Fair Expo. And we got together in Kyoto, and we went the round of Kyoto bars. And we and we had some geisha girls, and we drank until 4 o'clock in the morning, and then we couldn't get home. All the taxi drivers were out. There's no way to get home.
In early November of 1988, a fountain sculpture was dedicated at the new Municipal Art Museum in Fukayama, a city located in Hiroshima Prefecture on Japan's central coast. The story of Lotus Fountain and its journey across the Pacific from a studio overlooking Lake Washington to the inland sea of Japan is part of the story of a distinguished American artist's career. It also stands as an example of the international character of art in our time, the result of a creative environment in which communications and travel have begun to erase regional and national barriers, and along with them, some of the cultural differences that distinguish communities and peoples. In an effort to better understand the role of tradition in American art and by implication in a multicultural society such as ours, the Smithsonian Institution's Archives of American Art arranged for a video crew to follow George from Seattle to his ancestral home in Japan.
The last time I was there a year ago, I walked the ground again and went up to the castle and walked down to the area where I grew up. And that's when I got this idea about a lotus fountain.
It was done for a museum in Japan, and I felt that it was very important to do a wonderful job, a museum quality job. It's a little bit more involved, I think, in finishing it out and making sure that everything looks really good and tight. And plus, the water play on here required so much testing. When we see it turned on, we want to see everything looking just right. So it'll be very, very exciting because we spent so much time here getting everything tweaked just right.
Usually when we made those big ones, actually they were big, but they were done in one central post. And the fabrication and the shipping and crating, everything was very simple. But this one is going to be very complex.
What he does is he makes a artist's rendering, and he shows exactly how the water is going to come out. Then it's my job to translate this rendering into an actual dynamic, fluid dynamic type of thing, so that it will accomplish what he has put on the rendering. So in almost every case, we've achieved exactly what he wants to do.
Nishiki o kite-kaeru. That means the direct translation of the word is to wear a golden robe to go back to your village. That means you did well someplace and you're going home to your village. George did pretty well here and going back home to show what he's accomplished.
George is very, very Japanese. Nowadays, we cannot find like him. He's a very Japanese person, and it was kind of a surprise to meet him for me, because I cannot meet such a kind of very traditional Japanese person in Japan nowadays.
George, I think, particularly though, closes the gap. Having had an education here in this area, although his art itself is strictly American, it's not Oriental, but His oboes, for instance, really came from Nepal. There are symbols in his earlier work, particularly I think in his tunis and his paintings, that's a little more oriental. His sculptor work, though, I think is truly American. But he's a great bridge between the East and the West. I just hope that we can see this bridge expanded.
I just tried to forget everything about Japanese culture at that time until about 1950. I began to realize what I was missing, or try to remember all the things I learned as a child in Japan.